Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Giant Hunter Ranger, and of course with it comes a disclaimer. So this is a roleplay, casual play build. It is not meant for meta play. And let's go ahead and move on. So Giant Hunters are actually Northlanders, usually from the far north. But they do tend to appear everywhere, all over Tamriel. And what they are is they are master hunters of giants. And it doesn't mean just giants themselves, but trolls, ogres, giants, mammoths, bears, big, large monsters. They tend to hunt them in the outskirts, and it's usually ones that are causing problems with the local denizens of the land and stuff like that. So they tend to hunt on the outskirts of civilization where there is these types of creatures. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the character itself. So, we are a Giant Hunter Ranger. We are High Elf Sorcerer. As you can see, we do have 64 points into stamina because our primary role is stamina damage dealer. Now, this character can also play tank and healer, and they are effective at both. So to play this as a tank, you're going to take 64 points out of stamina, put enough into health to get you as close to or around 30k, and the rest back into stamina. You do not need to have all 64 points into health to play this as a tank in a dungeon or an off tank in a trial. And primarily they are off tanks. Now, to play this as a healer, you just take all 64 points out of stamina, put it all into magicka, so you get a good magicka pool. Now, if you're going to play this as a healer, you're also going to want to change the Mundus Stone to the Atronach. And if you're going to play this as a tank, you've got to change the Mundus Stone to the Lady, so you get those higher resistance values. Alright. Now, going over the stats, as a High Elf, we do have 20k max magicka, 19 stamina, 19,900, almost 20k health. We do have 34k stamina. We do have a 664 mag recovery, which is kind of low, so you'll see why we have our weapons set up the way we do. We also have a 1085 stam recovery with a 410 health recovery. Now, going over our weapon and spell damage, we do have 2,943 weapon damage with a 43% weapon crit. We have a 105 spell damage with 31% spell critical, and we have a 14k spell resist with 14k physical resist. Now, moving on to the Mundus Stone for when you're playing damage dealer, we do run the Thief Mundus Stone, and like I said, if you want to play this as a healer, Atronach Mundus Stone would be better, and if you want to play this as a damaged or as a tank, the Lady Mundus Stone would be better. Now, we do use Tri-Stat food with this, and that is our primary food source. The reason why we use Tri-Stat food is so we can get that good amount of magicka, health, and stamina in our characters. Especially when playing a ranger type, because their primary thing is they hunt creatures on the outskirts of society. They do this alone a lot of the times, so they need that greater amount of resources from all three types, so this way they can take advantage of all three types of resources when they're solo playing, or solo farming, solo hunting, whatever you want to call it. Alright, moving on to our equipment and inventory stuff. In our inventory, we do keep tripods for when we're going to tank. We do use Dubious Cameron Throne sometimes for like when we want to play more aggressive into damage dealing. And we do use spell power pots for when we want to be a healer, and we use warrior power pots for when we want to play damage dealer. Now, you can also use Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which I do not have down here, but you can use that as another way of getting higher mag recovery. You won't have as high of magicka pool, but you can get higher. But yeah, that's pretty much what we do here. We do use primarily Tri-Stat food, like I said, the Longfin Pasty with melon sauce. This gives us increased max health, magicka, and stamina for that more hybridized play. Now, going over the sets, starting with our monster set, we are using Krogs as our monster set. Being a giant slayer, you want something that's going to be effective and fast at killing enemies. And this set can proc really fast, and it can go off a lot. On top of that, it does give you increased physical penetration, so that allows for higher damage output with your character. Right. Moving on, or going over this set. So 1 piece adds physical penetration. 2 piece, when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn the Druid limbs that create shockwaves in front of you, dealing X amount of physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. This effect can occur every 3 seconds. It's pretty much firing non-stop. You'll probably proc this maybe 10 times in a fight sometimes, and it's that crazy. The next set we run is called Hunting's Rage. A lot of people probably guess this. The reason for the Hunting's Rage is the 2 piece adds weapon critical, 3 piece max stamina, 4 piece weapon critical, and the 5 piece adds 299 weapon damage. This is probably the better critical set that you can get in the game for high weapon damage because it gives so much high weapon damage. Now moving on to the other set, we are using what's called the Undaunted Unweaver set. Now this is a light armor version of this set, and what this does is the 2 piece adds max stamina, 3 piece max stamina, 4 piece adds spell critical, and the 5 piece. When you use an ability that costs stamina, your light attacks deal an additional 774 damage, and your heavy attacks deal an additional 1161 for 10 seconds. So you're using a lot of stamina based abilities. This is going to pretty much stay applied to you all the time. And it's really nice. It's just an extra boost of damage on your light attacks. And the spell crit is nice for when you're playing more of the healer type, because that just gives you more spell crit to play with. Alright, now going over the traits and enchants on the gear, starting with the monster set. We are using Invigorating on the helm to give us higher mag recovery and stam recovery. This way we can take advantage of those higher recovery rates for the roles when we're playing them, like damage dealer and healer, and then sometimes even as tank. Alright, and with this we are using a medium helm and tri-stat enchant. A tri-stat enchant does give you all 3 types, magicka, health, and stamina, and they are expensive. Because people keep bringing this up to me, these are expensive, I understand that. If you don't have access to tri-stats, you can wear 1 magicka, 1 stamina, and 1 healthy on your big pieces, and it'll give you not a similar result, but it gives you something close. You are about 400 shy of what you normally get, so just letting you know that. And then on the smaller piece, we are using a medium shoulders Divine's max stamina. Now, if you haven't noticed yet, all my Rangers have this setup. The reason why is they want to maximize their stamina pools, and they want to maximize their use of Mundus Stone. So that's why we do the Divines with the stamina. Now, moving on to the chest, we are using a heavy chest reinforced with a tri-stat enchant. Now, heavy armor is going to give you the most resistance this period. So with having a heavy chest, putting this in reinforced will make it the most ideal piece to give you that higher resistance value that gives you greater survivability. Moving on to the other small pieces, we are running Divine's max stamina on the gloves, the belt, and the boots. And they are medium on the gloves and boots and light armor on the belt. The reason for the light armor on the belt is because this piece of armor, out of all of our armor pieces on our body, gives us the lowest amount of resistances, regardless of what armor type it is, medium, light, or heavy. So just making it light just gets that out of the way of giving you the lowest amount of resistance here, but at the same time it also gives you almost equal resistance when you compare it to the other armor types. So it's not off by much. I think it's off by 100 on medium and 200 on heavy. The leggings are also medium with an invigorating trait and tri-stat. The invigorating trait again is to give us that health, stamina, mag recovery, so we can play into all 3 roles, but we can also take advantage of that higher recovery rate for our different roles. And then the tri-stat is so we can hybridize and then play with all 3 resource types. Excuse me. Moving on to the jewelry. we are using 2 Tri-Rune Rings of Undaunted Unweaver. The reason I go Tri-Rune on these is because it's the same as using a Tri-Stat enchant minus 1 or with an extra 1 point added to it. So if you look at the Tri-Stats here, they give you 434 Magicka and Stamina. These give you 435 Magicka Stamina. And then they give you 477 health. This gives you 478. So it gives you almost identical to a Tri-Stat with 1 off. And that's if you're not using infused armor. So this is really nice. It gives you that good amount of resources to play into all 3 pools, the Magicka, Stamina, and health. And it gives you just a good amount of overall resources. So it gives you good health, gives you good Magicka, good Stamina. Alright. The reason for the 2 weapon damage is to maximize our weapon damage, because that is our primary source of damage, is going to be weapon damage. The only time we use magic damage is for healing primarily, and for some spells that we might use for damage dealing when we're playing a healer. Now, moving on to the necklace, we are using a Bloodthirsty necklace with a Stam Recovery. Now, the reason for the Bloodthirsty necklace is it increases your damage against enemies under 25% health by 10%. It's basically like a minor execute. This makes your light attacks, your heavy attacks, all abilities do 10% more damage. The Stam Recovery is to help with our resource management and stamina side. So, now moving on to the weapons, we are using a 2-handed sword on the front bar. When you fight a giant, you want a big weapon. So most giant hunters will use a 2-handed sword. And with it, Nirnhoned is the best option because it does increase your weapon damage and spell damage by 15%. Because it increases the overall damage of the weapon by that much. So we go to 1806 damage. That damage is equal to both spell and weapon damage. So that's really nice. On the back bar, we are using a infused weapon damage enchant. Now remember, weapon damage enchants don't just do damage for weapons. They also increase your spell damage by the same amount. So with this one, we get 452 weapon and spell damage for 5 seconds. Now we get this to stay up for about 9 seconds. Well, more than 9 seconds. Usually it's about 14 seconds. And that's because of the infused trait. The trait increases the effectiveness of the enchantment by 30%. So it goes from 2 something to 4 something. So it gives you that higher amount of weapon and spell damage. Or I think it's like 3 something. And then on top of that, you reduce the enchantment's cooldown by 50%. So that 5 seconds is actually 2.5 seconds, but it rounds it up to 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, you get this thing to proc. Depending on the ability you're using, you can usually get it to proc 3 times, or stay applied 3 times. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, we're going to move on to skills, starting with class skills. Now, we are a sorcerer, and sorcerer does work best for this type of setup, because of the fact that the sorcerer itself gets a passive that increases lightning and physical damage by 5%. So, just remember that. And that's any physical damage. So I do unlock the ultimate class active abilities and passives for all 3 skill lines. Now the reason I do this is so this way I can take advantage of every skill in my class for different roles in different situations. Because if I'm playing a healer type, I do use things like Liquid Lightning. I use Daedric summoning abilities. The Summon Twilight. I also use the Summon Unstable Clanfear for when I'm solo playing. And I also use things like Daedric Magic. I'll use Restraining Prison. Sometimes I'll use Crystal Blast. Sometimes I'll use the Dark Deal. Just depends on the role. Like I said, if I'm playing tank, healer, damage dealer, I have all these skills unlocked so I can take advantage of them in different situations. Whether it's PvE, PvP, dungeons, or trials. Moving on to weapons. Our primary weapon type is 2-handed, so we do unlock the ultimate active abilities and passives for it, and we do unlock all of them. The reason why is because different situations, different rules. So we use different tools for different things. Same thing goes for bow. We unlock the ultimate active abilities and passives for this. And then moving on to armor skills. Light armor, we take the first 3 passives because we are wearing 1 piece of light armor and we want to take advantage of every benefit our character can get. So spell warding does give us a little bit more spell resist. Evocation gives us magic recovery by 4% and reduced magic cost by 2%. And then Grace gives us reduced snare effect by 4% and reduced sprint cost by 3%. And medium armor, we're going to take all the passives. Dexterity is going to give us higher weapon critical. Windwalker gives us higher stamina recovery and reduced stamina cost. Improved Sneak gives us a better reduced sneak cost and reduced detection size. So we get 35% reduced sneak cost, we get 25% reduced detection size. Agility increases our weapon damage by 15%, and this is when you have 5 or more medium armor pieces equipped. Only one in the medium armor that is like that. Next one is Athletics. This one increases your movement speed of sprint for each piece of medium armor equipped and reduces your dodge roll cost by 4% for each piece of medium armor equipped. Heavy armor, we're going to take all 3 passives. Resolve is going to increase your physical and spell resistance by 382. We are wearing 1 piece of heavy, so we do get that benefit. We also get the Constitution benefit, but we're not worried about the health recovery. We're more interested in the second one, which is you restore 108 magic and stamina whenever you take damage. That effect can happen every 4 seconds. And then Juggernaut will increase your max health by 2%. World skills, Soul Magic. Now you can be a werewolf with this, which I have tried, and it works out amazing with this build. You get really absurd damage output with it, and that is an option. So, the ultimate, the active ability, and the first passive are optional here. A lot of people say a lot of this is useless, but it actually works out really good. I like to use Soul Assault in PvP sometimes because it just does an absurd amount of damage, and I even use it in PvE. Consuming Trap I like to use when I need resources out in the overland when I'm playing by myself or I'm soloing world bosses. This way I can just throw this on a trash mob, kill him, and I get 10% of my resources restored. Soul Summons, very important, allows you to receive 1 revive once every hour without the use of a soul gem. And then Soul Lock allows you to, whenever you kill an enemy with a weapon ability, you get a 10% chance to automatically fill a soul gem. So that's why I do unlock these 2. Guild skills. Now this is where things are going to speed up a little bit. Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Psijic Order. We do unlock the ultimate active ability and passives for each of these because we do take advantage of these in different roles. Most of the time when I'm playing Damage Dealer, I will be using a lot of the skills here for the Fighters Guild in my bar. And then even when I'm playing a tank sometimes, or a healer, I will use some of these abilities depending on the situation. Now, Silver Shards I don't use as a tank. What I mean by that is Ring of Preservation. I might use this as a tank along with a damage dealer or a healer so I can give support to my group. Mages Guild, I do take the ultimate active abilities and passives again. And I take the ones that best reflect my ability to play my character in different situations. Like when I play a tank, I can use Structured Entropy. This will increase my max health by 8%. So that's an option. I like to use Spell Symmetry sometimes when I'm playing a tank, so I get resources back from magic, because I use a lot more magic abilities when I'm tanking. And then Psijic Order, ultimate active abilities and passives. I do take all of these as well. And because of this, I do use some in different situations. Like sometimes I'll use Crushing Weapon instead of Wrecking Blow. This way I can get the passive Spell Orb and the Concentrated Barrier. So when I block an attack, I get a 5,800 shield, and then Spell Orbs will do damage, physical damage, every time I cast that ability on its 5th cast. So I spam that a lot, the Crushing Blow, so I can get that extra cast off. Undaunted, I take all the active abilities and passives. The reason for that, all these active abilities are considered synergies, so even if I'm tanking, I will use Inner Beast, so I can give my group a synergy. I'll use Sanguine Altar when I'm playing a support character or healer to bring more heals to the group. And then Tangling Webs I'll use for group support and also synergy. Spike Bone Shield I use when I'm a tank, so I can give a group synergy. And Mystic Orbs I will use either as a healer or a damage dealer. A damage dealer. Because I do like to use this for support purposes to give my group aid, even as a damage dealer. It really helps out to be able to throw out some resources every once in a while. Alright, moving on to Alliance War. Alliance War skills, just so you guys know, and Undaunted requires you doing dungeons to unlock this skill line, and to completely gain experience for it, you have to play dungeons. Alliance War, you have to play PvE, whether it be Battlegrounds or Cyrodiil. And to unlock these skills, you have to play through PvP to get these the experience to unlock these, because it requires something called Alliance Points. Alliance Points are a type of currency you can use to buy gear sets in PvP, but also it unlocks your skills of this type. So you do have to play PvP to unlock these skills and passives. You don't have to play super high rank in this. You don't have to go to rank 10. You can go to rank, I think, like 6 with this line, and you can unlock everything I have. And this one, the same thing. I think it's rank 6, and you can unlock everything I have. So, but the main skills I unlock are the ones that are going to best affect me in PvE, because that's what I primarily play. I don't play a lot of PvP unless I'm in a mood for it, and then I go play PvP for a couple days. But we take the ultimate 2 active abilities and the passive from the support line, and from Assault we take the ultimate 2 active abilities for different situations, okay? Moving on now to racial skills. Because we are a high elf, and a lot of people are going to question, why did you pick a high elf? As I always say, any race can play any of my builds. So I like to show that any race can play these builds effectively. Not that they're the best at it, but that they can do it. And then that's all that matters. As long as you're having fun with a game, that's what matters the most. And if you like specific races, play that specific race. There's no reason why you shouldn't. And playing to this idea that you have to be a specific race to get the specific benefit to play a specific way, so you can maximize your character, honestly, it's not a huge difference. Like, if I'm not playing a high elf with this, my max magicka on this character will drop by 2,000 versus other races. I still have an 18k magicka with other races. I just don't get the spell damage like these ones get, and I don't get the spell recharge, which means whenever I'm using my class abilities, you restore magic or stamina, whichever is lower. So in this case, I'm going to be getting magicka back. So I don't really need to worry too much, because I'm going to fill my magicka pool up really well with this. And then on top of that, whenever I use an ability with a channel cast time, you take 5% less damage. That's some of the reasons why I use Soul Assault with this, is because it's a channel ability, and I'll take 5% less damage when I use it. Alright, moving on to crafting. Alchemy, these are optional in the beginning, but these are something you're going to want to build to getting. And that is medicinal use, and that is when using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. So when you use a potion, the effect of the potion lasts 30% longer. Most potions have 45-second cooldowns. Most of this will make your potions last 47 seconds long. So it'll make your potions last longer, so you can keep the effect of them the whole time that the potion is on active use. So when it comes off of active use, you can reapply it. You can keep it constantly applied this way. Provisioning. Gourmand and Connoisseur. Now, these add 20-minute duration to any drink consumed for Connoisseur and any food consumed for Gourmand. Since we use Tri-Stat food, we use the Tri-Stat food, that food gives us max health, magic, and stamina added to our resource pools. Now, for having it active, now it normally lasts 2 hours. With this will make it last 2 hours and 20 minutes. But when you're different races, some races can take advantage of the food and drink things here, and they can get extended times added to it. I think it's the Nord and another race that gets that. So, it's really kind of nice. Alright, now going over the skills we have on our bar, starting with the first ability. Now this is our primary spammable we use, and it is called Wrecking Blow. Now this deals X amount of physical damage, and it grants you Empower for 5 seconds, increasing the damage of your next light attack by 40%. What you do is you activate this, and when you get done with the animation, go into a light attack. Your character, you can usually animation cancel the ending upswing to get the light attack off quicker, and if you're really good at it, you can pull this rotation really quick. The next ability we have is called Silver Shards. Now, this ability fires a bolt from a hand crossbow that deals X amount of damage and reduces the movement speed of the enemy by 40% for 4 seconds. But it will fire up to 5 additional bolts at other enemies near the initial target for 47% less damage. Now, being in that this is a Fighter's Guild ability, depending on the creature type. So if you happen to be hitting a undead, werewolf, or Daedra with this, you will also get this. Fighter's Guild abilities deal an additional 20% damage to Daedra, undead, Daedra, and werewolves. On top of that, you also get 3% weapon damage increase, so you do get that 3% higher damage. Now, a lot of people are going to ask, why aren't you using Dawnbreaker? I'll get to that in a minute. The next ability we have is called Carve. Now, this deals initial damage up front, and then it bleeds the enemy for X amount of damage over 10 seconds. This is a great ability because this keeps our enchant on the front bar proccing for the duration. Now, the one on the front bar will proc twice, which is a mag recovery. So, I think I went over the weapons, yeah. So this is an Absorb Magicka enchant, and this does magic damage, and it gives us Magicka back. It will fire every 5 seconds. So for the duration of Carve, the first application of Carve, it'll proc this. Second application of Carve, or tick on the Carve, will proc this. So at 5 seconds, or when you hit, and then at 5 seconds it'll reapply. And sometimes it gets out of whack because of other cooldowns from other things. So, alright, moving on to the next ability, we do have Executioner's Strike. Now this is for when the enemies get below 350% or 50% health. You deal X amount of physical damage, and it will deal up to 200 or 350% more damage to enemies with less than 50% health. You start putting this in your rotation at 50% health. At 25% health, this becomes your primary spammable. So you won't be spamming Wrecking Blow with a light attack, you'll be spamming this with a light attack. The next ability we have is called Bound Armaments, and we don't keep this for the active part of the skill. The active part of the skill is protect yourself with a Power of Oblivion, creating a suit of Daedric Mail that increases your block mitigation by 36% for 3 seconds. We use it for the next part. While slotted, your max stamina is increased by 8%, and your light attack damage is increased by 11%. This gives you a good way to get that higher damage output with your character from your light attacks, because you do weave a lot of light attacks. The next ability we have is called Onslaught. Now, Onslaught is the ultimate that I choose to use over Dawnbreaker, and the reason why, this costs 128. Dawnbreaker does cost a lot less, but the reason we use this is this will strike an enemy dealing X amount of damage, and it only hits one enemy, but the attack ignores the target's resistances and grants the physical physical and spell resistance equal to the amount ignored for 8 seconds. Killing an enemy with this ability immediately refunds your ultimate cost. So if you use this on the enemy and you kill him, you get that resource back. So that's what we save it for. We save it for the killing blow. So that way we always have our Onslaught up. Moving on to the back bar, we have our first ability, which is called Rearming Trap. This basically sets a trap after 1.5 seconds. It activates, or it becomes active to where it can affect an enemy. And then when it's triggered, it deals X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 6 seconds. It will immobilize an enemy if they can be immobilized for 6 seconds. And it also grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10%. After being triggered, the trap can reset itself and trigger one more time. So we keep this up for 12 seconds basically. Next ability we have is called Venom Arrow. Now this one, you will shoot an arrow coated in what's called Shadow Scale Poison, and this will deal X amount of poison damage up front, X amount of poison damage over 10 seconds, and then on top of that, if you hit an enemy that is using or casting an ability, whether it be Magicka or Stamina, they will be interrupted, set off balance, and stunned for 3 seconds. The next thing we have here is called Endless Hail. This does an X amount of damage every 0.5 seconds for 10 seconds. So this thing will proc 20 times in 10 seconds, because it hits twice in a second. And and you got to think, that's 10 seconds times 2, that's 20 times. That's crazy. Alright, next thing we have is called Hurricane, and this will deal X amount of damage every second for 15 seconds. The winds that you create swirling around you increase in damage, dealing 150% more damage and up to 9 meters in size. It starts at 5 meters and it expands every so many seconds. I think it's like every 5 seconds it expands to its largest size, which is 9 meters. And while in this form, you gain Major Resolve and Major Ward and Minor Expedition, increasing your spell and physical resist by 5,000 turn 80 and your movement speed by 10%. On the back bar, we do have the bound armaments again. Remember, this is while slotted, so in order to get that 8% max stamina and the light attack increase, you've got to have it slotted on both bars. And then moving on to the final ability, our ultimate, we are using Ballista. Now, Ballista is really great. Basically, you summon this spiritual bow out of nowhere. It says a Ballista. But it'll turn on the targets you have it targeted to, and it will just unleash and fire, this bow will. And it'll fire non-stop for 5.2 seconds, dealing a total of X amount of physical damage. Now, this you can set down and keep doing your rotation. So this one is really nice. It does cost 149 ultimate. I like to use this in dungeons a lot because it's just really fast damage and it does a lot of damage. So, alright. Now, since you guys have seen that, we're going to go over CP really quick. Starting with the red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken against direct damage attacks by 20%. On to the next one, we have 20 in a medium armor focus. This increases your physical resistance by 1900 while wearing 5 or more pieces of medium armor. This gives us a little bit more physical resist. And then 18 into spell shield. This gives you increase your spell resistance by 1729. Now, if you guys don't remember, I mentioned earlier that we get a little bit of resistances from wearing one piece of light armor, spell resist. That's why we don't put 20 points in here, is because that spell resist and the fact that we wear one piece of heavy, that gives us physical and spell as well. So we wind up getting more equalized resistance when we do this setup. Moving on, we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. We have 43 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%, and 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. Sorry about that. Hairball. On to the final red tree. We have 40 points in a Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery. This increases your healing received by 5%. And then moving on to the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle green tree, we have 75 in the Mooncalf. This increases stam recovery by 14%, and 43 in the Arcanist, increasing your mag recovery by 10%. So before you ask, why am I not putting in the Tenacity? After doing thorough testing with points in Tenacity and points not in Tenacity, there's not a big enough of a difference in what you get in for your heavy attacks and resource return with any points in the Tenacity or without. It's like a 50 to 100 point difference. It's really not worth it when I can put into my mag recovery and get more out of it. Moving on, we have 40 in the Tumbling and reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%, and 40 in the Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 in a Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. We have 23 in Elfborn, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 10%. And 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing your Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. Now you guys are going to ask, why do I have this hybridized when most of my abilities I use on my bar are physical damage? This is so you do not have to change your character from playing a different CP from playing a tank, a damage dealer, and healer. You can just leave it as is, and you can just keep playing as is. All you have to do is change your skills around, change your Mundus Stones, and that's it. You don't have to change a bunch of other stuff. Now, if you want to play this PvP, then I would suggest changing some of these trees around. Alright, moving on. 35 in the Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your light and heavy attacks damage done with two-handed, one-handed, and shield, dual wield, and bow, as well as werewolf form by 20%. We do a lot of light attack weaving. Like I said, we get 11% more damage from our light attacks. We get another 20 from this. That's a 31% increase in our light attacks. On top of that, we get extra damage output in our light attacks, and it's crazy. We wind up getting so much, it's not even funny. 40% in the Mastered Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Light attacks are considered direct damage attacks. Moving on, 43 in the Mighty, increasing your physical poison disease damage done by 10%. Remember, all physical damage you do is also boosted by another 5%. So you actually get 15% from physical damage, 10% from poison and disease. We have 23 in the Precise Strikes, increasing critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%. And 20 in the Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, I am going to show you guys two quick parses. One on this smaller skeleton, this is to represent basically, or on the precursor, this is represent what your damage would be like in a dungeon, because most of the time you're going to be dealing about 300,000 damage or more to an enemy in a dungeon, or like a dungeon boss, than you would be 3 million, 6 million by yourself, okay? You're usually dealing about 300 something. Then we're going to go up here and we're going to do a parse on this big skeleton, and this thing's going to represent what it's like being in a truly organized group for damage. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with this. We are going to drink our power pot. We're going to pop up our hurricane and just go through our rotation. Oops, I did that too soon. There we go. So we pulled about 25k DPS on that thing, and I can get usually up to about 30k. But as you can see, we go to 4,067 weapon damage, 58% weapon critical, 70% critical damage, and we have a 1487 physical crit because of our physical pin because of our Krog set. Now, our spell damage is 2566 because we are a wood elf or a high elf. We get higher spell damage, and our spell crit is 31.9%. Now, we aren't using any Magicka-based abilities, but you can, and that's the nice thing about this. Like if you want to use Liquid Lightning, you could throw it on here. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing on the big guy here. Now remember, with this, I'm going to get higher Magicka, stamina, and health because of the buffs this thing gives and everything else. So, oops. And with this, I can get roughly to about 40k if I can get him to stop doing the Wrecking Blow. And we'll go ahead and drop our Ballista with this. And as you can see right there, I was about almost 40,000 DPS with this thing. This thing can push some really high DPS, and the reason why it pushes so much DPS is that Undaunted Unweaver increases our damage done with light attacks by 700 and something more damage, and that 774 damage, that's added to my light attack damage. That doesn't include when I do critical damage. I do critical damage and then it gets 774 added to it. So no matter what I'm doing, I'm always gaining more damage. And remember, my light attacks deal extra damage because it's considered physical damage, and then I get 5% added to that damage. Then on top of that, I get another 11% more damage to my light and heavy attacks, and I have 20% damage. I get a lot of damage output with this character. Now what we are going to do is we are going to adjust this for more of a solo play scenario in a dungeon setting. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm actually going to drop bound armaments, and I'm going to move this over, and I'm going to do the same on the front bar. I'm going to drop bound armaments, and I'm going to move these two abilities over, and we are going to grab two other class abilities. One of them we're going to grab is Hardened Armor, And then we are going to, on the back bar, we are going to grab an ability called Power Surge. Now this will give me increased magic and or spell damage and weapon damage even more. So I get my spell and weapon damage will go up higher because of this. But what we're going to do is we're just going to jump over to the Depths of Malatar dungeon. Every time I deal critical damage, by the way, I will heal for X amount of damage because of Power Surge. Alright, Depths of Malatar, by the way, was added with the Wrathstone DLC. It is a more recent added dungeon, so it is considered one of the more difficult, challenging dungeons. It isn't as difficult as the other dungeon in this, which is called Frostvault. Frostvault definitely has a little bit more difficult learning curve because of the one-shot mechanics on some of the bosses. In here, there's very few one-shot mechanics, so... And you guys can guess it already. I'm going to get frustrated if I don't fix this. Great sword. Stupid bug. Alright. So as you guys can see, I took care of those guys pretty quickly. I'm going to do the same with this group as well. Just because I lose at 11% damage doesn't mean I don't still do a decent amount of damage. I do a decent amount of damage because of the fact that my character just has an immense amount of damage output. If I can get a crit on this guy, you guys will see, like, I can get a decent amount. That only showed 13,000. When I have max weapon and spell damage, I can crit upwards to almost 30k with Wrecking Blow, which is just absurd. Where are you hiding? There you are. See, he was trying to be sneaky and just sit back there until I came around the corner so he could do that. Oh, and it killed me. Holy cow, that's a first. I did solo this, but it ate me alive. It was because I stayed in the poison too long and I didn't keep my hurricane up like I should have. But you want to keep your hurricane up non-stop as much as possible. It'll keep you alive really good because it deals damage constantly and it constantly will heal you. So, but that, my friends, is the Giant Hunter Ranger. I hope you guys like this build. It is a lot of fun and it can be really exciting depending on what race you play. I do enjoy it with the Wood Elf or the High Elf. I think that's really good. Wood Elf's really good for it. Nord is amazing. Breton's not too bad. Imperial's not too bad. Orc is super powerful for it, and so is Dark Elves and Khajiit. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Again, so you guys know what that means. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.